So I think we'll start with player tips, just because that's what's on my screen now. So I wrote a few things down. So first, to give good tips, we need to talk about what Daggerheart is. From the core rulebook, Daggerheart is a collaborative fantasy role-playing game of incredible magic and heroic adventure. During your journeys, you may find yourself rubbing elbows with nobles to investigate and stop an assassination plot. Daggerheart provides the tools to tell a story that is both heartfelt and epic. So the main thing is collaborative fantasy role-playing game, and there's a big emphasis on narrative. So a lot of times, the way to be the best player that you can be is to feed into the narrative and, take actions that further the narrative. And it also ultimately depends on what kind of game you and your group are playing, because you can run Daggerheart without the huge narrative emphasis. You can essentially run it like run-of-the-mill, whatever you normally play, and just use the rules. But the best parts of the game are when you do use the mechanics for narrative purposes, and it makes it a lot of fun. So first tip is find a GM and group that fits your style. That's what I was saying before. The rest of the tips are kind of more focused towards that narrative play, but also they can still be good for people that are maybe just in it more for the gameplay perspective, because it's still fun even if you play it that way. Second tip here, don't be afraid to take action. So sometimes people may hesitate because they don't want to, they like weigh pros and cons of things, and like, well, do I want to do this? But if I get fear, the GM gets a fear. But maybe they, instead of just taking the action and furthering the story and either dealing with the success or the consequence, you have just as good of a chance to generate a hope as you do to give the GM a fear, and you have 100% chance to further the story. So taking action is one of the best ways that you as a player can be a good player and drive the story, or just drive the action. Even if you're one of the gameplay type tables, taking actions is going to generate more resources for you and the GM, so y'all can play the game more. Action is what drives the narrative forward. Tip 3, which kind of relates back to take action, spend your hope. If you're taking action, you'll always have hope to spend. Some players can stockpile it and rarely spend it because they're waiting for the emergency where they need it. It is a valid way to play, but it's a fluid resource. You get more of it as you take action. So basically, so far, find the group that fits, take action, and spend your hope. And just a little example, also in a recent Downtime Dialogues, I think it's for episode 4 of The Nameless, basically a big chunk of that Downtime Dialogues was us discussing how, Tuglo can spend more hope, because she said, well, sometimes I feel like I'm not doing anything, I'm just sitting on the hope, and so we're like, oh, you can do, well, let's say I wrote down some examples here. You can help an ally, which basically you spend the hope to give them advantage. Utilize an experience, so when you're taking action, spend that hope to use your experience and get you a +2 or 3 or whatever you have on that experience. Initiate a tag team role. This one, I know it's expensive, it's 3 hope, but the huge benefit to a tag team role, most people think of it as only combat oriented because you get to add your damage together, but you also have to keep in mind the strength of it is that 2 people are rolling against a difficulty, and you get to pick which role you want to go with. So the power of the tag team is in the action rolls, not the damage. The damage is good, but in a game like this, there is a certain point where you're doing unnecessary over damage. But the real big cool thing that you can do is tag team to do non-combat stuff. The example I gave, we were talking about it the other day, and I was like, yeah, you could tag team a presence roll. It's like, I'm trying to convince this person, or it's like, before I convince him, me and my party member, we're going to try together, we're going to tag team, and we're both going to try. And so that basically just, greatly increases your chance of success. So tag team roles, really underrated, not just for combat. So definitely keep that in mind. And of course, activating a hope feature. There are tons of skills and abilities that use hope. So generally, if you have a character or a class that uses a lot of hope, you won't have a problem with, I have too much hope. And then also there's the side piece of, don't be afraid if you have a good GM, and especially if you're like a narrative focused table, don't be afraid to ask if you can use that hope to do something unconventional, like a combat ability in a non-combat scenario to do something unique, kind of like the tag team. So like the example I'd put here is Guardians and Seraphs have access to I Am Your Shield. You could, if the narrative calls for it, you might ask the GM, hey, my party member is getting like attacked verbally right now. Can I mark my resource to step in and take the attention off of them? Because even though I Am Your Shield, combat-wise, is I step in and take the damage for you, you could always use it in a narrative way, in a social situation. So those are just a couple. I'll go over them one more time. Player tips: find a GM and group that fits your style. Don't be afraid to take action. Spend your hope and think of interesting ways you can spend it. Essentially, those are the only things I could think of at the moment that would really help out a player. It's just take part in the story, enjoy the collaboration with your friends, and yeah, hope you roll plenty of crits in the future. Stay tuned for more Daggerheart content. Stay tuned for more Daggerheart content. Like, comment, subscribe, share. We'll see you next time. Peace.